One. Peeps, folks, what's the beef? Chef Fit Podcast. Cameron speaking to you using this beautiful microphone. I hope you can hear me soundly and clearly. Petey, what's
chocolate
the
voice?
Chocolate rain, folks, all day.
All good in the hood. Cam, how's it going down under?
Yeah, fantastic. Well, fucking as we were just saying there before the podcast, the weather is brutal. For anyone that's kind of heard me talking about Australia while I've been living here, while we've been doing any of these podcasts, the weather's been cat. It's been absolutely fucking cat. It's been because I'm looking back home. I'm looking at like Peter right now as he's twice as tanned as I am. In fact, he's got a lot more tan. I may as well be fucking fading into the wall behind me here. Homer Simpson.
Look, you have the tash on.
Stop. You wouldn't be able to tell there's even a human face there. Fuck me. It's pissing rain. It's windy. And yeah, I'm
And we have an anomaly heat wave here lasting the whole lockdown.
Mental. Move to Australia, they said, folks. Jesus Christ. It was nice for a couple of days while we were here, and we definitely did have a nice January and a nice December, but it was nice in ways. It was like 45 degrees, then you'd have a fucking 20-degree day, and then there's no ozone layer, so when you fucking do walk outside, it'd be freezing cold if you're in the shade, and as soon as the sun hits you, it's like getting fucking thrown into a microwave. So, yeah, I suppose it just took us by surprise, but we're hanging in there. We're all G. How are you getting on? You're in your last fucking couple of days of lockdown.
Yeah, tonight it's officially a school night. Got the call yesterday saying back to work Thursday morning. 2 days of corona training, and then back to work Monday morning. Right.
Jesus, man. I suppose it's sorry.
I loved lockdown. Right. I thrived from start to finish. And then they're all going on about, phase this, phase that. And then there was a couple of things that were starting to come back open. I was like, oh, Jesus, I just hope I get June out of it, like a proper little greedy little arsehole after having 2 months off. You know what I mean? I was like, I hope I get June out of it. And then got a text off the boss going, I'm going to call you in an hour. I have some really good news. And I wrote back, my idea and your idea of really good news are two completely different things. I'm sitting there half cut, walking the streets of town with the missus going, that's it, it's over. Back we go. But I was reflecting back on it because I had when they said we're going to be closed down for 2 weeks, that was what they thought how long the lockdown was going to be, right?
Back in March.
And back in March, yeah, Jesus Christ. And I remember on the Friday afternoon, I was on Chef Fit, and I did a live video saying, if you go back to work on Monday morning, how do you feel it went for you? Would you have any regrets? Did you learn that new? Would you have done things differently? Or would you be looking back on, shit, I wish I had done this, or I wish I had done that, or I wish I had done more of this. So I did that like a little mental exercise for myself today. And when I look back on it, I'm very grateful for the time I had off. But what's really good is the stuff that came out of it. Like, I reflected on where I would have been if I wasn't in Sheffield at the time. And I would have been staying up till 4, 5 or 6 in the morning, playing Xbox, and then getting up at 2 or 3, eating shite, the circle, yourself.
Yeah.
But with this, all of us been getting up, eating great, moving every day, getting the family moving, family's doing great. And now that it is time to go back.
But it also allows you to enjoy that balance as well. Like, I fucking love, getting on the Xbox and just fucking escaping for a while. But I think the whole thing is you'll struggle to enjoy your escape if you haven't earned it, especially when you're used to earning it, which you've grown accustomed to in the past 2 years. And, I'd be the exact same. Like, as we come out of lockdown, I suppose it's proven how powerful routine is and how powerful having a bit of structure and discipline is, and how it can kind of save you mentally. Not only save you physically, like again, not gonna lie, we could have all fucking eaten better during lockdown, but I think we made the best of a bad hand considering the situation. But more so in terms of just the general idea, getting up, fucking getting your exercise in. If there's something productive that you can do with your day that day, you do that thing. And by the time you're fucking settling down in the evening, you know, you've earned it and you're not overthinking that. Whereas I think a lot of people, you know, as you think that full holiday mode of saying, fuck it, I don't need to do anything, that requires discipline or productivity because that makes me uncomfortable. Like, you got to understand that the discipline is freedom, and it does give you it. Like, that is what the freedom is. Like, you do the work now so you have freedom for the rest of your day to do what the fuck you want and not even think about it. And then you wake up tomorrow and it's like, fucking repeat the process. And how quick did the 2.5 months go? Like, that was I think that was before lockdown in Ireland, was prior to Paddy's Day, you know.
Yeah.
Over here, I think it was the week after. And now, like, fast forward, what are we in, fucking June?
June.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're in June, and that's we've come out of it.
Source always says is your day hasn't begun until you've earned it. You know, so what she means by your day is this, you know, your time to do whatever you want, or to chill out, or to, you know, once you have earned it. And what you've taught me as well is to get up and seize the day good and early.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not get it out of the way, but it's get it done, son.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's there's a huge difference between them two, like getting out of the way and getting it done nice and early. You know, when other people are still in bed, and it's the best time.
Yeah.
And then them structures that have kept me going the whole way through, and you know, they were well in place before lockdown, of course.
Yeah.
We made some adjustments when lockdown started, and now I'm coming out the other side better off than before it.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's just a testament to the path, and actually fucking, you know, sticking to your guns and not dropping the ball completely, and showing that it can be done, and proving that it can be done, and that there isn't the only excuse you have is when you take an excuse. You know what I mean? And if you don't accept it, like, you're fine. So no, that's fucking spot on. So last day of lockdown, folks, for old Petey before he's back into the mix and work.
Back into troubled water.
That's it. I suppose what I wanted to talk about in today's episode is something that's in the news consistently over the last couple of weeks, and it's the George Floyd situation in the States. Unfortunately, we all know, if anyone's been looking at the news, George Floyd was a black man who was basically murdered by the cops. And this is one of an insane amount of cases that have occurred. And, you know, Will Smith had a good phrase that it's like, people aren't more racist, it's just being recorded now. And it's a very true statement. You know, this shit has been happening. And I suppose my 2 cents on this, and why I feel I want to speak about this, is not only trying to jump on the bandwagon and go, oh, because that's not. I'll always have I try and remain as objective as possible. And what I want to do here is just try and get across the importance of knowing history, and the importance of knowing, you know, what's happened before, so you can decipher what's important now. And for a lot of people, we like to think that, you know, this is a modern day occurrence, whereas if you were to look in the past at the history of America, the Emancipation Proclamation, right, is basically 1863, Abraham Lincoln emancipated black people from slavery. So there was a proclamation that stated that there is freedom for black people and we are all equal. That then led to the American Civil War, where you had the Confederate Army and the Union Army, and they were fighting over that. So the Army in the South wanted to maintain slavery. Army in the North, the Union, which had the support of the government, was fighting to eradicate slavery and move forward from there. Fast forward 100 years from there, you still have, even though slavery wasn't a thing, you still had the remnants of that situation, where black people were still treated as subhuman. And that's literally what it is. You know, black people were being treated as subhuman. And fast forward to today, we're seeing a similar treatment. Now, what I want to break down for people is not only we all know what happened is wrong and it's fucking outrageous, and it's angered, especially anyone that has a foot, like it's 2020. Anyone that has a head on their shoulders, that is a benevolent human being, that has a fucking heart, knows what happened is disgusting. It's disgraceful, and it's, you know, it's enraged the world. It's enraged the world, and I totally understand the violence that's going on right now, good or bad. I understand that anger. And I suppose the point I'm trying to make is, as you look through history, racism used to be open season. Racism used to be something that you could get away with openly. So you think about like the Jim Crow South, the Jim Crow laws that were in the South, where you had segregation. You know, black people had to sit at the back of the bus instead of the front. They couldn't integrate. Restaurants, there was a separate section. Water fountains, fucking toilets, separate section for black people. This was in the 60s. And as we saw in the 60s, probably one of the most powerful times in black history was the Black Panther movement, the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. You know, all of these extremely powerful figures came to the fore and started fighting back. And obviously at that time, the civil rights movement coincided with the hippie movement, and you had a lot of change in America while the Vietnam War was going on. And all of this was anti-war, and it was about finding equality, about finding fucking civil rights for people who have been downtrodden for their entire existence in America. From that period, onwards, open season racism not ceased to exist, but it went behind closed doors. Okay, it went behind closed doors where no longer you could say an N-word and get away with it. No longer you could openly treat black people like that. Technically, that was supposed to be what happened. And if anyone hasn't focused on what I think people are missing right now, and the thing that pisses me off about this situation is you see things like hashtags all lives matter. And that was kind of a counteraction to Black Lives Matter. To kind of say, well, there's white people being killed as well. And, you know, there's more stats to show. Like there's always going to be a devil's advocate. There's always going to be people who are like, why is it just black people? And I'll fucking tell you why. Here's the reason why. Open season racism is taken out. Okay, cool. Does that mean racism is gone? No, absolutely fucking not. What ended up happening was, as Ronald Reagan became president in the 80s, early 80s, they started enacting the war on drugs. And Nancy Reagan, who was the first lady, she was the figurehead and the spearhead of the war on drugs. Remember that fucking ad where it's like, this is your brain on drugs. And he cracks an egg into a fucking frying pan and the egg fries like, this is your brain on drugs. Scare tactics, they basically designed...
Just Say No campaign.
Yeah, exactly. It was exactly that. And they literally designed it to induce fear around drugs. Now, at the same time, the crack epidemic hit the black community. So what ended up happening was they enacted laws that for anyone who had a minor drug offense would be jailed for life, pretty much. 3 strikes and you're out was the rule. So if you had 2 minor offenses and then you got 3 minor offenses, you're done. You're gone for life. You get caught with a fucking bag of weed, you're gone for life if that's your 3rd offense. And in the black community, what was happening was you had this drug epidemic going on. You had a drug epidemic going on. We could talk about the conspiracy of the CIA, you know, fucking supplying drugs and whatever else. But there was a drug epidemic going on. Overly policed areas. So you had cops who were literally like stopping just black men on the street and frisking them and arresting them for whatever fucking meaning they had, on top of the police brutality. This was the mentality. And the media kept sprouting this fear of all you see is black crime, you know, black community. You slowly but surely, you're conditioning this fear into America about black people, which is false, because what we see is what we believe. And if the media just shows you one fucking narrative all the time, that's going to slowly but surely condition your mind. So America is actually scared of itself overall. It's scared of itself within. You know, so that's why you have such a massive separation. You know, you have like fucking white people up in the Hamptons on the East Coast. Like that's a totally different story to what's happening in fucking, South Central LA.
At the end of the fucking road, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like two totally different worlds. And what separates those is you have fear that's been built in deliberately. Now we think about this for a sec. You have the war on drugs, which basically completely decimated the black community, and you have some astronomical. I think there was a documentary I watched that really changed my mind, or not changed my mind on it. I was already on board, but that made it very obvious to me, and it was the statistics of people in prison populations, and what percentage of that population were black, and it was astronomically, something like 2 million as of a couple of years ago, 2 million people in jail in America, which is 3/4 of the world's jail population. The majority of those convicts are black. And the reason that is because you have this war on drugs that makes it easier to jail black people, even though the offenses are ridiculous, because obviously weed is being legalized now, and you have people who are serving life sentences for having a bag of weed. Like, can you fucking imagine? Now, why am I making this point? Because if you have this war on drugs, what also became a thing is it became profitable. It became profitable on a state level. So let's say like the fucking state of California. It became profitable for the state of California to have more people in jail. That's a fucking funny one, isn't it? So now we've gone from
modern slavery.
Exactly. So we've switched and if anyone hasn't watched it, it's a must-watch documentary. I think it's called 13th or 13. And it's about the American prison system and really how they've changed from like the Jim Crow laws of open racism. Okay, cool. That's no longer acceptable. Well, what way can we fucking, systematically, what way can we systematically ostracize the black community? And that's where the profitability of the prison system came in. So you have the war on drugs, which jails you. And then you have a prison system that literally, for the state that has the prison, it's profitable for them to have more people in jail. So then you have and then you have the media that perpetrates this narrative that spreads fear. So not only is America fucking terrified, but you've got a black community that, you can't say, like, the racism doesn't exist anymore. Sure, it's fucking everyone's equal. But it's not equal, because you're not being policed the same way that these people are. You know what I mean? Like, can you imagine walking in the street and just being stopped because of the color of your fucking skin? And this is the third time in your life where we've had to stop you, and there's a minor offense, you're going to prison, and you're going to prison for the rest of your life. Like, that's happening so much more than people like to talk about. So what my point is we've gone from open season racism to behind closed doors, systematic racism. And when we have a situation like this, it's so clear cut and fucking obvious that mentality is still there. Like, you have a cop here that lad, and he's been arrested since, 15 cases of 15 complaints about him without discipline. So like that, this has happened. He hasn't killed somebody, but he's come fucking close to, in terms of how he's dealt with people, in terms of his brutality. That means he's had 15 situations where he should have been disciplined by his boss, and he wasn't disciplined by his boss, which is fucking terrifying. So now you've got this lunatic on the streets, and now he does this and he kills George Floyd. Now, how many cops are in the same boat? Well, I would wager that it's that's not all, and there's great police. And this is the problem with a situation like this. When you have fucking, cunts like that, now you've got the police are the enemy, and they're being built, and it's this whole thing on fear. But this guy gets away with that. And the other thing that kills me is that America makes it so obvious where their, priorities lie. They're then protecting, like, the amount of police outside that guy's house, outside his gaff, to protect him from the protesters who are trying to give justice. And it's like, where the fuck he's been murdered. Do we not get this? Is this not really obvious? He was murdered. There's a video of him, like, for 9 fucking minutes. This guy has knee on his neck, and he's slowly losing his life. And he's dead. And you're protecting him. And like, that would be probably similar enough if they hadn't been fucking protecting him. It probably would have been your man. Who was that dictator in the Middle East? Fucking Gaddafi. It's like, you know, the people eventually got to Gaddafi, and he's like, you know, he's already been fucking mangled, and they're just dragging his fucking lifeless body through the streets. That's the kind of justice that probably would have been delivered to fuckface McGinty, who had his knee on his neck. And probably right, you know, like, when do we learn the fucking lesson? I understand the rage because I'm fucking angry about it. I understand the rage, and I think this whole they're burning and they're losing, and I can't believe they're doing it. Of course they fucking are. I'm surprised it hasn't gotten worse, to be honest. I'm surprised it hasn't gotten worse. How are you getting away with that? You know, and how long can a country go? This is the other thing about Americans is that, and no offense, but a lot of Americans believe that, you know, it's the center of the fucking universe, and, you know, that this kind of shit is normal. It's not. It's mind-boggling to people outside the States kind of seeing that. Like, if something like that happened in Ireland, like, God fucking forbid what the repercussions would be, you know. And I think people have to stop, you know, well, that's just America. It's not. This is 2 or 3 decades of, actually, it's not even 2 or 3 decades. It's fucking 200 years of fear being deliberately spread. So you are already separating the people in this country. And then you have a prison system that profits off the black minority being in prison, and you get fucked up situations like this. And then you have police who are very poorly trained and very poorly fucking disciplined and are self-preserving, so they don't ever check themselves. They get away with this shit, and even if there's cops that disagree with what that guy did, they can't do anything because he's protected by, you know, the overall, like, it's like any company. It's like any company, man. Like, that's the thing we think. Like, police are people. So it's like they're self-preserving. And I have a lot of respect for someone who, you know, if you're doing it for benevolent reasons and you're actually trying to protect and serve, fucking fair play. But it's very difficult to look at that when you're seeing shit like this, when it's so clearly that's not protection and serving. You're a racist lunatic who shouldn't be on the fucking streets. You know what I mean? Like, and you're the one who's supposed to be protecting us, and you end up killing someone. Like, it's baffling.
So about the scary part for me is the history repeating itself, right? So I don't think that anything is going to change because of these riots or because of what happened last week and this week. I think that when the dust settles and they start to rebuild and then they get back to normal, it's absolutely forgotten about. Nothing's going to change because this always happens over there, and it always will happen over there. So we had it happen in the late 90s in LA. The exact same thing happened. Right?
Rodney King.
They saw them. Yeah, they saw it happen, and they took to the streets. And it was like, right, they have to do this. They need to take to the streets. They need to burn the place down. And about 6-7 months ago, I was listening to a podcast called Stuff You Should Know, right? And basically, they talk about, you know, how does plumbing work? How does this work? You know, and then every now and again they would do stuff you should know from history, right? And there was one called the Tulsa riots, right? Also known as the Tulsa massacre, and it's basically what happened in the late 90s in LA, what happened in New York or in Minnesota last week. There was this young fella. There was a black community in a town in Tulsa that had 9 millionaires living there, right? And it was the only place that had black millionaires. One of them was one of the 3 founding doctors of the Mayo Clinic. Wow. He lived there, right? So this was a really, really thriving place. And the way that started was they had set up businesses, and then they were told by the surrounding towns, right, you're getting too big for your boots. You are not allowed to trade to white people, and white people are not allowed to buy off you, to give you business, and you had to stay within your walls. So they said, okay, grand. And they absolutely thrived, and they had a city, they had buildings, they had everything. It was one of the fastest growing cities in all of America, right? And the reason you haven't heard about this is as sickening as what happened last week, what happened in the 90s, and what happened here. There was a young fella who worked just outside in the next town over, and he worked in an elevator. So he worked as a shoe shine boy at the bottom of this thing, and the only place that black people could go to the toilet was up on the top floor of this building. And there was a white girl that worked in there as the elevator operator, and they used to have a little flirt when there was nobody else around. And then one time the elevator was coming down and it jerked and she fell over and he caught her, and then the doors opened up and she went, oh, get off me, you know. And everyone's like, hey, that ninja, that N-word, get him. And they got him and they bet the crap out of him. And then he got away, but his name got out. And the Tulsa Telegraph the next morning says, let's go and lynch that N-word. And had his name and his address in the newspaper, okay? They went down to his house. A gang, a white angry mob went down to his house, dragged him out, and tied a rope up on a tree outside. And then there was what happened because of the newspaper that gotten out there. There was ex-World War II black veterans heard of it as well and went and stopped this lynching from happening. And instead, he got arrested and then got brought to court. Now, again, the Tulsa Telegraph was covering this story about this young black kid who tried to rape a white woman in an elevator, and he has to be killed, and they just used the N-word over and over and over. And when he was down at the trial, they said, how do you plead? And he said, not guilty. And he said, well, I find you guilty. You have to die. You have to be hung until you're dead. Bang. That was the trial. There was no other hearing. That was it. He was a 14-year-old boy. When they went to take him outside, there was the mob outside waiting for him, waiting to do the lynching, because once a black man was found guilty back then, they just take him outside and they hang him straight away. The black veterans, World War II veterans, got there as well, and they were armed, right? And then they stood outside and they said, no, this is not happening. You can't have this happening. The sheriff came on and goes, listen, I'm with you. The white sheriff, I'm with you. Let's just keep this calm, right? And then one white man went over and goes, no, you can't have this. And he went to pull a gun off this ex-veteran. Shot went off, and then all hell broke loose. And there was a firefight in the middle of the town, right in front of the town hall. And these black veterans had planned a way of getting out where they had cover, and then they go to the end of the block, and then the ones who go back that way, and basically they got back to their town in Tulsa. During that night, that same sheriff gave out sheriff's badges to 115 people out of that angry white mob. During the night, they snuck into the town and hid in closed buildings, in shops and stuff like that. And then at 2:15 in the morning, the sheriff came by, blew a whistle, and then all the people came out from where they were and proceeded to murder almost every single person in that town. Men, women, children. That doctor that founded the Mayo Clinic was dragged out of his house. He wasn't even with the mob or with the veterans or with anybody. He was taken out and shot in front of his kids. Every single building, every shop, every house was burned to the ground. The next day, when this was going on, like this town had its own aircraft, had its own landing, had an airport, and the white people came, stole their airplanes, and then dropped petrol bombs down onto the houses to set the houses and buildings on fire. The National Guard was called in to help with the situation, and what they did was they arrested any black person that they got. And then the people that they arrested proceeded to live in prison camps for 2.5 years until they were nearly all dead. There was a media blackout from that day. You were not allowed to report on it. You weren't allowed to report on it. You were not allowed to register your dead. You are not allowed to have a funeral. Recently, they have started this. The reason why this podcast came up was because there was a film that was the first time anybody had said anything about it, where it was like a DC one. I can't remember what it was, but they said it during the Tulsa massacre or Tulsa riots, depending on the narrative that you want to look at. But recently, they've started to look into it, and they found mass graves where there's 50 people here, 100 people there, 100 people over there. no funerals, no registering dead, and then all the other people that weren't killed were put into prison camps.
Yeah. So when you say all lives matter and you try and counteract what, you know, the Black movement is kind of saying, like I just wager that these people, history is undeniable, and history is clear cut on what it is, and that's why I think it's so important that we look back, because stories like that, land of the free, home of the brave, like that's hell.
Bollocks.
Hell, that's living hell. You know what I mean? Like, what kind of fucking insanity are we talking about here? Like, we're talking about human beings doing this to other human beings.
And less than 20% of Americans are black, but
Yeah.
in prison, 85% of the prisoners are black.
Yeah, which is, those statistics alone tell you exactly what you need to know. And it tells you that the Black community is, you know, it's almost been designed to keep them in that situation. Like, literally, you've been designed with how drugs were kind of filtered into these communities in the 70s and 80s, the crack epidemic and what that led to afterwards. You know, and
why was it the black communities that had the crack problem?
Yeah, exactly.
Because they, when the slaves were freed, they weren't looked after.
And
anytime they did get a hang of themselves, like in Tulsa, they shot back down again.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? They were always in destitute. They were always going to struggle. So it's easy to see why the black community had that massive drug problem. It started after Vietnam, when street drugs started, you know.
Yeah.
And then in the 90s, when it really hit with the crack epidemic.
Totally. And you had some mental figure. I believe it's 1/3 of Vietnam veterans were heroin addicts, because heroin was so widely available over there. And the majority of soldiers were coming back addicts with no fucking infrastructure to come back to. So you're coming back into... Is that my phone? Is that my tap? No. Okay. This microphone picks up fucking frequencies and all sorts of shit.
No, that was one of the kids coming in going, sneaking back out.
So when we coming back from Vietnam, and you know there's no infrastructure and you're a drug addict, like what the fuck do you do? Well, it's like, of course, you're going back to no money, nothing, and you've just risked your life for a country that supposedly has your freedom. Like, none of this. What the point of us saying things like this is that you must know what has happened before, because if you look at the situation right now, it's basically a similar thing that's going on, but it's kind of subtle and behind closed doors. So you can kind of make it look like, you know, oh well, like this is just bad training by the cops. Bullshit. This is fear-induced cops who are under the surface been conditioned to be fucking racist and see black people as different. And therefore you see actions like that. That wouldn't have happened to, like, you know, you see a school shooter, some fucking, you know, schizophrenic fucking 14-year-old white kid being slowly walked out of a school after he's shot a load of kids. And it's like, that cunt should be fucking strung upside down and hung, drawn and quartered, in my opinion. So why is he getting the fucking treatment, but like an innocent black man slowly gets suffocated on the sidewalk with his hands tied behind his back? Like, what the fuck are we talking about? And the point I do want to make, and the reason that I touch on all of these things, and I touch on the systemic jailing of black people for profit, okay, the reason that I talk about that is because in the modern day world, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, we have a movement behind political correctness where and I feel, you know, this extreme left political correctness thing, I believe it's so focused on the wrong things, and we're so focused on shit that doesn't fucking matter that we're not addressing the stuff that does matter. So, like, you know, if you say that you're a racist when you're not really a racist, you've just said a word and you've taken it out of context, you know, or you're a bigot or you're a homophobe, and these labels are so freely thrown on people that all of a sudden anyone, you know, if like I've been thrown into the toxic masculinity bucket a couple of times because I'm a big male who lifts weights and I'm fucking, you know, I'm a confident man. But like I know I'm an extremely nice, generous, tolerant human being. So when you're so quick to throw people in because they have a differing opinion to you, it ruins society's ability to fucking solve these problems, you know? So that's when people are talking about like all lives matter. Like all lives matter is just a counteraction to political correctness, because they don't want to just like, why is it just black people? When the reality is, if you look at the history, it's very, very obvious what's happening. And in a modern day sense, it's the same thing. It's just slightly more subtle than it was before. Before you could get away with open season, like in Tulsa, you know what I mean? Which is just mind-boggling. And now it's through jailing people and through, you know, fucking drugs in the community and all of these. That's your means of controlling this demographic of people. But what I want to get across to people is that we should all be tolerant of each other, and I get that, and we should all respect each other. But we need to focus on what the fuck is actually important. You know what I mean? And for me, I think political correctness, like, do we need, like, if you're, let's say an example would be, if you're a transgender and you want me to call you a certain thing, no fucking problem. Absolutely no problem. I'll call you whatever you want to be called. Okay. But don't try and create this movement where it's like, well, we're going to enact a law that brings in 98 fucking pronouns, you know, so you can call someone Zer, Z. To me, it's like, no, there's a biological, you're a man or a woman, and if you choose to be something else, that is your right, and you should absolutely go and do it. But we're so focused on shit that's inconsequential. And I always said this about the human race, that we have these mental situations coming up because there isn't a true test of our race. There isn't a war that we're fighting. But there is actually a war that we should be fighting. And this is the war we should be fighting. We should be seeking to fucking, change that prison system. We should be seeking, especially, and I'm talking about America here, we should be seeking to take the money out of politics so that when politicians do actually come in, they fucking do something instead of the same shit. And then we're so focused on, and everyone wants to scapegoat Trump, you know, and everyone says, I don't fucking like Trump. I think he's a fucking idiot. But I'm also a realist. And I know that if I was to look at the statistics, even though he tweets things that are absolutely disgusting, and yes, he tweeted a fucking racist from the 60s and said, they start looting, we start shooting. He always talks shit. That's him. He talks shit and he's an idiot. But if you think that he's the cause of the problem, you're so fucking wrong. This has been there so much longer than that. And I would also argue that fucking, what did Obama do?
He's a huge part of the problem because he's in that seat now.
Yeah. That it's like, oh, well, fucking, this is all Trump's fault. This is Trump's America. What the fuck did Obama do for the black community? Did he undo that prison system? Did he start trying to fix these things? Did he? Fuck. No one has. This has been the case since fucking, open racism before Ronald Reagan, subtle racism since Ronald Reagan, which is like the early 80s. And that's been the exact same thing all the way through. And what I think we're doing is we're focused on the wrong thing. There's a rage there, but there's a rage that's focused on the wrong shit. Undo the system that's leading to the abuse. Don't just, and yes, break the fucking, you're burning, you're looting. I get that rage, but, don't direct it at the wrong things. Direct it at the things that actually are going to fix the fucking problem. You know what I mean? Donald Trump's a bollocks, but the problem existed way before he did. I think he's just an easy target as a scapegoat. And we're so we're focused on the wrong shit. You're a racist, you're a bigot, you're this, you're that. When the people that are being accused of being racists and bigots aren't racists and bigots, And we're using things like, we're trying to change language that you can't say certain things, even if that's not the context you're using in, still can't say all of these words. And I don't know, for me, that's something I'm very passionate on. Like, I might be seen as, oh, you're fucking intolerant. It's like, I'm extremely tolerant, but I also base my opinions on reality and fact, not, oh, you've hurt my feelings, so therefore you're a racist. Like, that's bullshit. And that bullshit stops us from really focusing and addressing the problems that are here at hand, which are so fucking obvious right now. Because now you've just got thousands and thousands and thousands of people across America who are fucking enraged and they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. And like Killer Mike is a rapper from Run the Jewels. He's also done a good bit of stuff with Outkast. He's a black activist, and he's fucking on the ball. Killer Mike is very, very on the ball. Great fucking musician, but very on the ball.
He
And
always has been.
yeah, and his speech was excellent. And he gave a speech. He's like, I don't want to be here. He's got 3 family members that are cops. And he's like, you know, young people are burning and looting because they don't know what the fuck to do. They're just angry. So the key thing is, it's like, start strategizing, you know, and even over there, it's like, start coming together as a community, start voting these shitty prosecutors out of office, start changing fucking things from that side of things, the systemic approach. So that the patterns and all the shit that leads to the jailing and all this stuff within the black community, that needs to be changed. You know what I mean? As you said, how many fucking riots have we had? How many riots have we
And
had?
a lot of them can't vote if you have a felony.
Exactly. So like, that's, how can you undo the system? How can you change that system? That's
You know Sammy Davis Jr.?
Yeah. Yeah.
He was a singer with the Rat Pack.
Yeah.
The Rat Pack at the time were the biggest band in the world.
Yeah. Frank Sinatra, Dean.
When they were in, they had continuous shows in Las Vegas, and Sammy Davis Jr. was not allowed to come in the front door of any hotel in Las Vegas.
Fuck, I remember
he had to come in.
Yeah.
He had to come in the back door. That was the 60s. And he was one part of the biggest band in the world at the time.
Yeah. Absolute hypocrisy. You know, hypocrisy. Yeah, but can fucking enjoy your music, but God forbid you'd be a human being that could live on equal terms. Absolute insanity. Really is. So I suppose my message from this as we finish it off is, know your fucking history. Know what's come before. Because this is not the first time that this has happened, and it's probably not going to be the last time that this has happened. You got to understand that, and anyone that shares the opinion that, you know, oh, racism doesn't exist anymore, it's like, well, it actually does. It's just, if you actually look closely, it's manifested in a different way. And unless you deal with that, the rest of this is going to be ineffective. You know, the black squares and people come with that solidarity, that's great. And I think shit like that, as much as people are complaining about, you know, oh, you're blocking up the social media, it doesn't, fuck off. Here's the point. Is that
saying you're clogging up the hashtag? It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life.
But like,
you're clogging up the hashtag.
Who gives a fuck? The idea is that there's solidarity behind an idea. So like I've seen this, and Irish people, this is from an Irish perspective. You know, I've always grown up reading history. My dad always instilled a strong sense of history into me. The majority of the music that I grew up on, you know, was black music, whether that be my dad making me listening to blues, jazz that we would listen to as a family, hip hop that I would have been introduced to through my brothers, soul, R&B, funk, like all of these things are, you know, music is a very important part of my life, and that culture is something I grew up on. But I also know that there's a lot of Irish people that don't do that, and whether that be a friend of, like, a lad I grew up with, his dad, he used to fucking say some awful shit. Oh, there's a black lad living down the road from him. He wasn't even black. I think he was from Bangladesh. And this guy used to make black jokes all the time. And I'd be like, shit like that needs to be stamped out. And I think when we, you know, the black squares on Instagram, oh, it's blocking the social media feed. What my argument is that if I post it and I know fucking Peter posts it, well, maybe fuckface, whose dad was actually a proper racist and got away with it, but maybe he's going to start thinking twice about saying shit in front of us. Do you know what I mean? Because I know, in my opinion, I think this has forced people to actually start taking a side, as opposed to passively just, you mightn't be a racist, but you probably tolerate it from people as well. You know, and that's a problem. That is a fucking problem. And everyone knows that story, because you mightn't think much of it. You know, and maybe if people are actually putting their hand up and going, do you know what? I am fucking against this. I think this is disgusting and this needs to fucking change. Maybe that's going to start changing the attitudes of people who are on the fence. And anywhere outside of America, I think that's an important way to go. So yeah, sure, it blocks the fucking, who gives a fuck if it blocks the hashtag? Who cares? It's not the point. The point is that
that's not a thing, first of all.
Yeah, like, who cares? Like, the important thing is that, you know, who has kind of shown to say, like, actually, no, do you know what? This is a disgusting situation and I'm fucking against this situation. if everyone is against that situation, all of a sudden, then the next time that someone wants to pipe up with something that's insensitive, and I mean genuinely insensitive, not just like saying something that's true and taken out of context, saying something that's actually insensitive. And I heard people say shit that's actually insensitive. That slowly but surely starts to erode away and fade away. So know your fucking history, for one. Know what's happened before. Know what is actually happening in America, and understand that this isn't just a result of bad cop training. This is a result of a fear-induced media campaign for the last 30 years to fuck up the black community, and keep them downtrodden and keep them submissive to let's say white America. And don't believe the bullshit because there was a black president and there's black celebrities, that this shit doesn't still exist. It does. It's just behind closed doors and being delivered in a different way. So yeah, like, just fucking think about it. Try and look at things objectively.
I went to the march yesterday down at I went to the march yesterday out down to the American embassy, and then got home and found out as well that my eldest son Killian and his mates made their own way down, and they were there as well.
Big time. It's very.
That's him, 15 years old. He was like, "No, let's go down. The more, the merrier."
Good. But it's what's positive is that younger generation, it's changing. Like, my generation is very different to my father's generation and what they experienced. Our kids will have a very different viewpoint, and if we can maintain fucking and try and educate them as much as possible, the situation will get better generation by generation. And I believe it is, to a certain degree, in people's perception. People are far less ignorant, maybe, but still, in America, you have a lot of shit going down. Was that march? I think it was packed. Was it?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
So there could have been an awful lot more, but because of the time that was, because of what's going on with the lockdown pandemic, there wasn't as many as there could have been.
Yeah. But
there was easily 10,000 people.
Jesus.
Between 5,000 and 10,000 people from O'Connell Street down to the American embassy.
Good. Interesting stuff.
Yeah. Good to see.
Yeah. Folks, that is our podcast for today. A slightly different episode for all of us, but I think something that needs to be talked about. I don't know, I wouldn't always talk about current affairs and what's actually happening in the world. I usually try and keep it in line with our message, but some things I am passionate about speaking about, and I think it needs to be said, and maybe giving an opinion that you haven't heard before. And yeah, like, let's, as I said, through the things in the podcast, start fucking looking at things objectively. Don't just look for scapegoats to suit an opinion, but actually find out for yourself what the fucking truth is, and find out what the history is, and find out why this shit is happening, and go deeper into it, and we'll figure it out together, as people.
I'd be very careful if you do a source as well.
Exactly. Exactly. The old algorithm, it feeds you whatever you want to hear. So make sure that you're taking that extra time to really suss it out, folks. All right. That is our podcast for today. Petey, good shit as always, my man. On fire.
Thank you, bro. Thank you, bro.
Stay safe. I will catch you all very soon. End of lockdown 2020. Peace.